All right, quick drink of coffee, and let's get our day started. It's starting a little late today. Had a doctor's appointment this morning, and everything is in place for me to start my new treatments as soon as this job is done. Can't go into it much yet, but once this Wilson combat is finished, I'll probably have to take a couple of weeks off. So I don't know if everybody knows. Actually, I'm pretty sure they don't because it's not something I talk about. But I have diffuse systemic sclerosis, and it's an autoimmune disease that causes skin and connective tissue to shrink. Um, connective tissue runs all throughout your body, and it holds everything in place, especially your internal organs. And as that tissue shrinks, it pulls everything together, and eventually it'll kill me. But this new treatment is supposed to slow down or could potentially even stop the progression altogether. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed there, but we've been in preliminaries since the middle of November, ever since I moved here. I've been doing all the blood work and getting everything ready for the treatment. And we got the okay this morning that we got the okay to proceed. So I told my doctor this morning I need probably a month to make sure that everything goes well with getting this gun finished, and then I can take some time off. And the doctor's good with that. So lab work came back good. We're pretty hopeful. So on a secondary note, today is probably the last warm day that we'll have for about a week. So if I get any engraving done this weekend, it'll be a miracle. I mean, it's 75 degrees right now, but by tomorrow morning we're gonna be down in the 20s, which just doesn't happen this far south. Up north we could handle the 20s, but down here, we're just not ready for it. Get off there. So this is the same 105-degree graver I use for most everything else. Although I think my idle is a little low. I like running my idle really low when I'm shading. Because when I start my shade lines, there's no power. And then I slowly roll into the throttle. And that gives me that nice little taper. Oh yeah, that looks good. And these, we want to make sure that we don't cut these too deep, because I still want to be able to see the lines in there. So once I get all the lines in this first leaf, everything will appear to roll underneath this little flower section. That's a little better. A little right there kind of bothers me. But the dead giveaway that it's done by hand, so it's not an excuse for mistakes. Okay, I think I'm going to make a little change up here. See if you're sharp. Alright, let me sharpen this one up really quick. So this is a 1/16 that I'm sharpening now. And what I'm going to do is the center line of my leaves. I want them to have a little more definition than what they have. So I'm going to widen them up a little bit. Yeah, that looks fine. Yeah, that should visibly make it a little more obvious where the center line of that leaf is. Alright, now we can go in. Finish shading that. So basically we just stay parallel to our center line. Not letting my lines fall on top of each other, just letting them fall right next to each other. Then by the time we get down here, there's almost no space in between the lines. I'm paying as much attention to the white space in between the shade lines as I am the dark space. Now here we want the lines to, for this leaf, because of the way that I have it shaped, I want my shade lines to fall over the top of each other. That'll give this whole section a sculpted look. And here we're just going to stay parallel. Just keep the shade line parallel to the center line. And instead of my shade lines converging on top of each other, I'm following the same trajectory as the center line, but my line is getting wider as I get down, so it gives the appearance that the lines are converging when they really aren't. You just run that shade line until you, well, literally till you run into something. And if you have to go back and clean up one of those lines, you can. It's just running parallel, but the line's getting wider, a little bit deeper. And then trust the process. And by running our shade lines a little bit farther apart here, make it look like there's a little more light hitting this leaf. That should give this end leaf here this nice round look. Then you probably have to come back and recut this line. Yeah, but beautiful. Now if I were going to cross hatch it, my lines would be here, here, here. That would make it look like the whole thing is rounded over. Might as well be sculpting at this point. So, same process, but you want to run parallel to this line. Trying to stay parallel to this line, but also parallel to this line, which is why I keep straightening this out a little bit, because I didn't quite get it in exactly the right spot. There we go. And you got to remember we're under pretty high magnification, so we have a little bit of leeway. A little more idle. I'm going to keep messing with this idle until I get it where I want it. That idle's high. Remember, like I said before, stay parallel till you run into something, and in this case we're running into this line here, so we'll stay parallel till we run into it. That idle. My idle's just not consistent. And now we're gonna yeah. Oh, if I get the idle to stay just like that, I'll be happy. So now we're staying parallel to this line, but we're kind of start is going to form this little bowl. And run that shade line until you run into something. Now we're going to start spreading our shade lines out so that eventually this last shade line follows the same trajectory as the backbone. touch this little bit up right here. And now the tricky part is we need to continue these lines onto the other half of this leaf and fill in this and leave a little bowl of white space there. Now as we come towards this side, we want to start changing the trajectory of our shade lines so that we end up running the same trajectory as the outside edge of this leaf, which follows the same trajectory as the backbone. So start tapering the trajectory. Now fill in up there. Back cut whatever needs to be back cut. And then that's a lot of white space there, so it's I like it. And then we're not doing any more shading here, because this is enough. This is enough to pull your eye around and make it look like it's going underneath this leaf. Try not to do anything along the edge of the backbone, because I want that to stay bright, because that's what moves your eye around the piece, the backbones. Everything else is just filler. Again, staying parallel to the leaf line. And then this one here, we're going to run one line from the middle of this curve right to the middle there, and then our shade lines are just going to run parallel to it and kind of fan out a little bit towards the edge. Okay, new type of leaf. So this leaf, similar in shape to this one, but it's going to have a thumb right here. Well, no, we'll change that. See, one of the beautiful things about this leaf shape is there's so many different ways that you can do it. So whenever I'm setting up my artwork, I'll put in this leaf shape, and then again here, you'll see it repeated throughout the pattern. But when I go through and do my shading, then I can pick from several different leaf shapes that I want to do, and it all really depends on how I feel in the moment. So like this. Continue that. And center line. Going right off the point. So with just a little bit of shading, we totally changed the shape of that leaf. Get 2 more shade lines in there. The underside of the leaf. Now we're starting off parallel to this line, and then we want to finish off parallel to this line. So now we're just going to stay parallel to this line throughout the whole rest of the leaf. or try to anyway. Till you run into something. Alright, let's define the edge of this leaf a little bit. And then let's get a little three little plucks in the middle. Alright. Let me sharpen up my 105. Some people ask all the time why it takes so long to shade my work. Huh? This is a good example. There isn't any more shading in this piece than what I normally put in. And really, if I were doing an exhibition piece, there would be another step to the shading. Cross hatching on top of this, which would help to emphasize the shadows and the curvature of the leaves. But in a piece as big as this gun, doing cross hatching, would easily double the amount of time that it takes to do the whole gun. Easily. Alright, so let's get you next. Remember, parallel with here until you run into something. In this case, we're going to run into this line. And I'm kind of being aggressive and cutting these shade lines a little deep because I want to emphasize how they roll over the top of everything else. Probably could have gotten away with making them a little bit lighter, but and down here, this would be kind of the tricky part. We come right off of this cut. And if we did it right, this line should match up with this third line right here. We'll do the same thing here. Match those up. Match those up. Line that one just a little bit. So now it looks like this leaf is emerging out from underneath that one. Now, parallel with that. And keeping in mind this bowl shape, this big oval of white space that we want to have right here. Now run one line parallel to the backbone, just to emphasize that the backbone is coming out from underneath that leaf. And we'll do the same thing down here. Now we're going to do one, two, Trying to be really careful and maintain this little bit of white space right here because it's a continuation of this white space here. So to continue that around, we're going to start here. We're going to go ahead and build our white space first. And that white space is going to converge into nothing. Now we'll get one more line in there. Come on, Idle. Behave. Then, just to reinforce that this is going up underneath here, we're going to do one thin shade line. This is really thin. You know, if I get this idle right, I'd be really happy. I think that'll look good. Okay. Now, for this part, I'm drawing a couple center lines. So there's center line of that leaf. That one we don't need to. This one we do. There's the center line. That one we don't need to. this one. Okay. Your center lines I'm doing with a 116. Oh yeah, I want center lines up on the finial too. So get our center line here. And we'll wrap around just like that. Ah, come on, idle. Come on. I swear if I didn't have something to fight with every day, I'd think that something was broken. Let's do this one, and then we'll do those when we get to them. I think I may have to pull my handpiece apart and clean it again. Humidity down here just plays havoc on everything. It's one of those things I really need to figure out before we get into the rainy season. All right. I'm going to take a break, pull my handpiece apart, clean the piston, and get all that situated. Maybe it'll make this go a little bit faster. Okay, all clean. All clean. I also bumped up my air pressure to 30 from 25. I don't know if that's going to help anything. I think Steve recommends like 70 pounds. So I think one of these days I'm going to try shading with a 116. That way my shade lines can be wider and I don't have to fit 50 lines in this little space. I haven't tried shading with a 116 since I first started. You know, back when I was buying my M42 gravers from Steve Lindsay, you know, I couldn't really afford to experiment with gravers. So I think early on I made like the bare minimum. And that was a 105, a 96, and a flat. You know, and you're using a whole bunch of, you know, $15, $20, you know, gravers. Kind of only use the ones that you absolutely need. But now that my gravers, I think each one of my gravers is less than $1. We can experiment a little more. And if anybody wants to know how to build inexpensive gravers, just a second, and I'll show you. So my gravers literally start off as a 1/8 inch. I think that's an 1/8 inch. Might be a 16th. Yeah, it's a 16th. A 1/16 inch stick of carbide. That's about 1 foot long. Then I cut the carbide into 52 millimeter lengths, and then I'll set that carbide into a piece of brass tubing. And I think the length of the brass tubing is 32 millimeters. If anybody wants the lengths, the exact lengths that I use, just ask, I'll give them to you. But it won't really be relevant because I use a steeper face angle than what Steve recommends. So my graver lengths are going to be different. But yeah, you cut your carbide to length, and then you cut your brass to just long enough where you can get the Steve's colored bead on there. Epoxy all that together, and you have yourself a carbide graver for less than $1. I think total for that one carbide stick, I think that was $8. I don't remember because I bought them in a package of 20 of them. And then the brass tubing, that was the same way. I bought it in a package of, I think, 6 for $10. So if you make an initial investment of $100 to buy the carbide rod, buy the brass tubing, buy some epoxy, you can build probably 50 or 60 gravers for less than $100. Then you have all the gravers that you need to experiment with different profiles. Since we're talking about sharpening, the little stick out gauge that Steve provides with his sharpening templates, I don't know what the factory length is. I think it's like 1 inch, but I haven't used a factory one in so long that I don't necessarily remember. The one that I use is cut down to it's cut down to 15 millimeters long. That gives me a steeper face angle. And I think it just gives me slightly stronger graver. Lets me hold everything up a little bit higher. Come on, Idle. Alright, now we're going to do a slightly different leaf shape. We still have the same hook shape. We're going to do one cut. I'm going to start slightly farther back. And do the second shade. We're going to come the opposite direction, start right next to that second shade line. Then roll around and build a thumb. Start it back. We're going to build another white space right there. Making sure that your shade lines stay parallel to your backbone. Then come up from here. You're running parallel to the backbone again. This can be a difficult cut because you're cutting out of another cut. In the end, roll it around. Very nice. Just enough to break up all that white space a little bit. We'll combine both of these into one. Break up that white space. Trying to maintain this distance here, being the same here, the same here, the same here, the same here. Your brain's going to look for consistency, and simple consistency like that makes your brain happy. two things I wish I could solve. My idle problem, and it hasn't been this bad. It didn't get this bad until I got down here. So I'm pretty sure it's a humidity issue. But if I could solve my idle problem and solve the little burr of metal sticking to the end of my graver so I didn't have to wipe it off on this towel after every cut. If I could solve those two things, I'd be really happy. Staying parallel to that line. Alright, let's shade the finial so we can call this scroll done. We're just staying parallel to that center line. We're going to do it again. Run parallel to this center line. Come on, idle. We're going to slightly let our shade lines overlap when we get up there. I thought maybe turning up my air pressure would help solve that a little bit, but man, it's just now we'll get just a little bit right here. Don't want to overpower that too much. Now, let's get our Get this sleeve done, then we can call this whole corner finished. Did anybody else hear my air pressure fall off? This air compressor is only about 3 weeks old, and it's not doing a very good job keeping up with even a Lindsay. So I think that when I'm down, when I'm on my break getting my treatment done, probably have to return my compressor and get a new one, another new one. It doesn't look that good. All right, let's get all these chips off. All right, let's see what we're dealing with here. Okay. Always with the grain of the steel. Screw it back. Looks pretty good. Well, there's no question what it's supposed to be. Oh, where are we at on time? 4:30. Hmm. Just curious to see how long that took. So that was an hour and a half. And that's not counting the amount of time that it took to pull my handpiece apart, clean the piston. That's just the amount of time that I was recording. So it's exactly an hour and a half. Just sharpening now. Now the heel's a little long. Still a little long, but it'll be fine. You know what? That's so I'm still running the stubby end on my handpiece. Put the heavy stainless end back on. I don't know why, but the stainless end always seems to do better with the idle. Seems to do a little better keeping a consistent idle. You can even hear the difference. It's just more, it's more solid. I had to say something, didn't I? If you're in the market for another handpiece or for your first handpiece, this is not a good example of how the Lindsay handpiece performs. My idle issues are not typical. Not at all. off there. All right. Now pull this ink off of here. A little bit of dust from the ink is getting in my view. Things look a little weird. All right, nice and crispy. There we go. No, I might have got a little aggressive there. That's all right. Yeah, don't forget to zoom out every now and then. Make sure everything still has the same tonal value. On a big piece like this, it's easy to get change the number of shade lines that you do in one spot compared to the other. Denser shading will make the whole space look blacker, then the tone value is totally off. And even if your shade lines aren't absolutely perfect, maintaining a consistent tone value can help make up for it. Okay, I think I'm going to take a break for a couple minutes. I'll refill my coffee, grab a snack. All right, last push of the day. It's about 5 o'clock. Today's the last day, or the last nice day that we're going to have for a while. It's 75 degrees right now, and tomorrow morning we're supposed to be down in the 20s and 30s. So tonight I'm gonna go out and get a walk in before the sun goes down and it starts to get cold. It may be the last time that I get to, until late next week. And so, sunsets in an hour. Get another half an hour's worth of work, and you get my 2 mile run in. Well, I probably won't run tonight. I'll just walk. My calves are still pretty sore from the gym yesterday. Oh, let's make this a little bit bolder. There we go. Sometimes it still amazes me. When I start to get to this point here where I'm doing the final shading, and I get to see how it's progressed. You know, and then realizing that I made this. I did all this. Yeah, I did that. It's after struggling for so long to understand scroll work, getting to this point in my project, and yeah, I did that. It's pretty incredible. That's the center line right there. Yeah, it looks right. I think. And yeah, if you can't tell, the tip of my graver is dubbed just a little bit. And I'd like to do that when I'm shading, because when I'm shading I build up this rhythm, and then maintaining that rhythm is important to me. So I'm willing to sacrifice cut quality a little bit to get that rhythm, only because the cut quality doesn't suffer that much. Not enough to be concerned about. It's still pretty crisp. So, I mean, yeah, it looks like it's got a little bit of a burr on the edge, but that's where the leather on the wooden block comes in. That leather on the wooden block is just enough to take off that little bit of serration along the edge from dubbing the tip on the graver. Now I need to slow down. Feel like I'm getting in a hurry. Get one more in there. It's always dangerous trying to dig out of a cut. There we go, idle's back. I completely lost my idle there for a second. Okay, where are we at on time? 20 after? Just a little bit of leather scrub. Yeah, see, nice and crispy. Yeah, I just want to look at it now. I'm at the point where it makes me happy. It's the culmination of all that work. I know, kind of dumb and childish, but you know, I can be excited about getting to this point in the job. When you realize that came out of my hands from start to finish. Everything that you see right there came from my hands. started off with my drawing, and then every cut is from me. Oh wait, it'll get better. It'll be really amazing when I start putting eagles on here. That's what I'm excited for. I don't know if I'll record that part because there's going to be a lot of trial and error. I don't get a whole lot of practice doing landscape work, so I'll probably do the first one off camera. Oh well, I'll do it on camera, but then I'll just have to make a decision as to whether or not I want anybody to see it. I know there's a couple people that are really looking forward to seeing how um, I um, do an animal scene. But in all reality, I do an animal scene exactly like I do what I'm doing right now. One line at a time. Oh, gotta remember to breathe. Oh, so pretty. I like it. So let's see, that's top. A little bit of shadow under here. Oh, the shadow's a little crooked, but yeah. All right. I think that's a good place to stop for today. Man, I love shading. As long as I can keep that idle where it's supposed to be and get a good rhythm going. And shading is my favorite part. Look at that. Oh yeah. So happy with that. That looks great. Okay, that's where I'm going to call it for today.